So my presentation, what is participatory budgeting and why is it coming to North Lancashire? So a little bit about us. So who am I? Well, I'm Jez Hall. I'm a director of a not-for-profit called Shared Future CIC. And we work to empower citizens by supporting new ways of doing participatory budgeting. So we promote the model of participatory budgeting across the UK and internationally. I'm a bit of a community engagement nerd. I've been involved in community engagement and development work for a long period of time, and I'm really passionate about how we elevate the voices of everybody in communities. And I'm indeed an ex-Lancaster resident, but moved back to Manchester, where I'm based now. And Shared Future CIC does a number of things. Probably you may have heard of us because we did the Lancaster People's Jury on climate change. So we run citizens' juries and assemblies across the UK. We also do quite a lot of work around the social economy. So that is social enterprises and helping small organisations develop ideas and projects and generally think about how we can create that sort of regenerative economy. We work across the UK and sometimes wider, and we're a partner in the Closing Loops programme, as some of you will know. So although we don't have a massive role within the programme, we've got a particular responsibility around this participatory budgeting. So before I get on, I just wanted to kind of pause for a minute and get us to reflect for a moment on what the words participatory budgeting make you feel. And I'd be very happy if you shout this out, but if you just want to put it into the chat, just interested, what does the word participatory feel like to you? What does it mean? Anybody who's brave enough to make a quick statement on that?
Feels nice.
Feels nice. Any other thoughts about participatory?
Exciting.
It's exciting.
Invested.
Pardon?
Invested.
It's invested, yeah. So it's about investing in people and other people and things. Anything else? Caring and sharing. Any others? No? Oh, have a think.
Empowered.
And empowered, yeah. So I think participatory is a lot about people. So when you think about budgeting, how does that feel? What springs to mind when you think of budgeting?
A chore.
It's a chore. Any others? Thank you, Joe. Any others?
It's a good thing to do so that you're properly kind of oriented to what you're going to be doing.
So it's a way of planning and being prepared. Yeah. Any others? No? Well, often budgets feel like about limits and cuts. They are about making plans. They are about money. They feel sort of slightly less exciting. So how can we bring these two ideas about participation and getting involved and then thinking about money together? And that's really what participatory budgeting, by connecting those words, is trying to do. It's about getting, as it says, lots of people involved in conversations about how to plan and prepare, how to manage, how to make best use of the resources that exist within a community. There's a national definition of participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is the process of directly involving local people in making decisions on the priorities and spending of a defined amount of the public budget. It's quite a mouthful and it's quite boring overall. The one I particularly like is it feels like we have decided it's PB. And if it feels like someone else has decided it isn't. And that came from a Brazilian resident. So participatory budgeting began many years ago in the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil at a time of democratic renewal. And it was a way that the government and citizens could work together on filling the gaps that existed in that society. And from that initial development of participatory budgeting in Brazil, it's exploded and moved around the world over a number of years. But participatory budgeting is more than just grant making, and I'm going to do a little section now on how it's been used in different contexts and different scales, and then focus down after another short video on what's going to happen in Lancaster, what we hope is going to happen, and really hopefully get your views on what you feel is valuable about this process, where the risks and dangers might lie, and hopefully how you and everybody could get involved in deciding how the pots of possibility funding that we've secured could be spent to upscale and grow the food economy, the regenerative economy in the Lancaster district. So I'm just going to try and make my presentation move forward again. So participatory budgeting, there's lots of work on internationally, and a colleague of mine came up with this sort of list of what PB is. So it's about real money. It's not about making decisions on fake money, or just it's not a consultation. It's co-designed, so to work well, it needs the active involvement of as many people as possible. It's more than just voting for which projects get funded. It's about trying to think through, as that video showed, what are the different needs within a community. It's about building relationships between people who otherwise might not meet but are still bidding for the same pot of money. It's about creating that sense of community and common purpose, and through that to promote equity and fairness. People will hear from a range of projects and be able to look at their value, but also be able to think, well, who's actually going to deliver this, and do they have access to funds in other ways? Are they the ones that really should benefit from this limited pot of money? How can we make sure it's used wisely and really effectively to fulfill the needs of everyone? And it's open and accountable. Everyone sees the process in real time. It's not just like sending your application form off to a small panel who meet and then tell you whether you've been successful or not. It's a kind of a mini drama of democratic decision making in public, and hopefully it grows and learns and is repeated on a yearly basis. And we're really lucky within the Closing Loops program to have 4 years in which to really develop this model and learn, make mistakes, and improve, and hopefully over that period of 4 years really start to make a significant impact on the Lancaster community, Lancaster district. So I've said there's this model, participatory grants, and that's what we're going to be doing as part of Pots of Possibility. But there's also a much wider story around participatory budgeting, and that's why we hope that some of the council would be here today, although I think some of them have just dropped off at the last minute. But it's about how citizens could get involved in shaping the services and the investments of local government. So grant making is about money that is in a sense given to the community, to organisations, to people in the community to take action themselves. But the big story about PB is how you use it to shape also the spending and the investments of the other stakeholders, and in particular the local authority. So small grants, PB, what we're doing, participatory grant making, is a small pot. It sometimes has different names. It might be called a community chest, a pots of possibility, the big dish out. There's lots of different ways that you can brand this. But basically, bidders come to an open event and make proposals to an audience of local residents, people like themselves, anybody who is motivated to turn up, who then vote on which to support. And what we found is, from doing many of these processes, that it's very effective in engaging, networking, and enthusing local people. As I said, it's spread across the world. It's happening in every continent and at many different scales. The city of Paris is spending many, many millions of euros every year on PB, but it goes down as small to a forest schools project that I was involved with in Northern Ireland, where they had school children deciding how to spend small amounts of money on improving that forest, and it was thereby a learning event. So there's lots of different scales at which you can do PB, but there are some common values and principles throughout that. such as openness, such as anybody can get involved, such as it's about equity and fairness. And I want to just go into a very early example which I came across, which I found very inspiring, which was in the city of Belo Horizonte in Brazil. This goes back a long time. And it was reported about how they used PB as part of a mechanism to address food poverty within that city. So they did a PB process where they offered all sorts of different opportunities. So they set up farmers markets in the city centre. They set up access to foods in the favelas and in outlying districts. They created and rebuilt a kind of food economy through investing quite large sums of money, but also just changing some rules and regulations. And they also set up things like communal lunch kitchens, which were not just food banks, not just for people who couldn't afford it, but for everybody to have access to good, healthy food. And it started with this principle that to search for the solutions to hunger means to act within the principle that the status of a citizen surpasses that of a mere consumer. And that city, it was reported, has lower food inequity than in most US cities nowadays. So Brazil, fast emerging economy, this was obviously a few years ago, had a big democratic story as such around that. But by actually thinking about food in a different way, not as a commodity, they were able to address some of those inequities. And if you search for the city that ended hunger, you'd probably find it online, and there's a link in the presentation which will be available after today. And in Scotland, they've done a lot of PB. So they have a real sense of community involvement in Scotland. It's come out of that idea that they want to form a new nation as such. And they've done a load of work over a number of years where they feel that the best people to decide the future of our communities really are the people that live within those communities. And it gets large-scale national government, Scottish national government support, multi-million pounds, and lots of different projects and activities have happened over the last few years, and really encourage you to look at some of the resources on the PB Scotland website. So they started with the Community Empowerment Act in 2015, and then they moved to a landmark agreement where local authorities agreed to give 1% of their budget to a participatory process where everyday citizens would decide, not elected councillors, not officers in the town hall, but everyday citizens. Now, 1% doesn't sound a lot, but when you scale that up across Scotland, it's like £100 million a year. And in a city like Glasgow, it might be £10 million a year. So in a city like Lancaster, maybe it could be £2 million a year that would be decided not by those who have power, but by those who are actual everyday citizens. And in Scotland, they also developed the PB Equalities Framework. So they did a lot of work on making sure that this process was acceptable. So they worked with Disability Scotland to establish principles and rules, and they developed a charter to ensure that everybody could get involved. And despite COVID, this program's been going on for a number of years. They're still building and growing, and they're particularly growing youth PB, so PB within schools and within the community, but about building citizenship of young people, and also climate PB. So there are processes of £1 million now ongoing in Scotland to address climate change. So big scale stuff. So what are we going to be doing in Lancaster district? I haven't got lots of pictures, a lot of text here, but I thought it was useful just to lay it out in a very straightforward way. So we've got 4 years of PB funding. So there's going to be 4 rounds with grants of between £5,000 and £10,000. So people will be able to apply for larger sums than within the pots of possibility community grants. And that's to grow ideas and scale up pilots that contribute to a local ecosystem of regenerative initiatives and enterprises. So we're going to be launching applications this summer, and we're going to have a decision day in the late autumn. So we're going to, and quite the nature of that decision day is still to be decided, but that's the basic structure of the project as such. So there's going to be a number of steps within this process, and the first one is that we're going to be hosting a co-design workshop on the 18th of July from about 10:30 to about 12:30 at the Friends Meeting House, And if you make it to the end, or if you're in touch already with the Closing Loops project, please do sign up to be involved in that, that co-design workshop. Then there'll be an application pack for a simple application to bid into this fund on the LDCVS website. We're going to offer support and advice, so I'll be on tap, and I'm sure other people will be on tap. Then the applications will close, so there will be a date where you have to express your interest in bidding. All the bids will go to a verification panel to make sure that they kind of meet some minor quality standard, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we're going to have the decision day event, where we're going to invite people to come along and vote on the projects that they think should be funded. The grants will be awarded. There will be an evaluation process, and then hopefully next year we'll celebrate the work that has been achieved through this program, and also there will be another redesign workshop, so we'll be able to say, well, what worked well and what didn't work well, how would we make sure this is more inclusive next time, how do we make sure it's more fun, whatever it might be. And then we'll launch the second round sometime next year. So as I said, co-design workshop on the 18th of July. Everybody is invited. We hope that 10 to 20 people might turn up. We'll see. It's going to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. There will be lunch as well. And we'll be working through ideas like, what do we call this? How do we brand this? How do we make sure this gets out widely, not just to the people who are already engaged in the Closing Loops program? What's the application format like? How many, what questions do we need people to put in their expression of interest, with the idea that the final decision is made based on presentations later, so that form should be as simple as possible. Where should we hold the decision day event? What are the rules around voting? Do people get 5 votes each? Do they get 10 votes each? Do we order the projects? There's all sorts of issues around the design of voting, which is important. And how do people present? Do they make a 3-minute presentation, as you saw in some of those videos, or do they do a market stall where they set up their stall and you know, so how do we get people to learn about the projects and allow people to ask questions and find out about it? And then finally, how will we evaluate this process? So that's a design workshop that we're going to be hosting in the next couple of weeks. We've got some ideas. It's not a blank slate, but we really want to make sure this fits within the Lancaster culture and framework and the existing work that is ongoing. Then there'll be the application pack. I've put the website up. It will be on the same page. There'll be a specific pot, specific application for the PB, the grant making. There'll be some FAQs and the closing date by which you have to get your application or expression of interest to apply in. And then, as I said, I'll be available to answer questions. There's also Samuel, who's on this call, and other people at Shared Future. We might hold some workshops sometime in the early autumn where people who are thinking of bidding can come along and find out more and think about what makes a good application and think through what's the dangers and worries they have around this. We'll be trying to communicate regularly with people and explain what happens on the decision day. Then we're going to have a verification panel. This is just 3 or 4 people who will look at all the bids. So the CVS will be involved in this. And we're basically asking these questions. Is this process legal? Can we fund it under the restrictions that the National Lottery has placed upon us? Is this within the scope of funding? Is it fair? Does it feel like it fits with the process? Is there ways for people to get involved? Is this actually going to, you know, make people who don't have access to healthy food perhaps more accessible? And is it achievable? So have people ask for a reasonable amount of money? So it's just a basic check. It'll be green, amber and red, just traffic light those. And the idea is not to disbar anybody, but to be able to offer positive feedback to people who are wishing to apply so that they can improve their bids. So that verification process is really a kind of quality assurance process that's built into the every PB project. And then there will be the decision day, as I said, in late autumn. There will be a discussion about the format. Will it be the 3-minute presentations? Will it be the marketplace? Will there be opportunities for people vote online? Perhaps will we put some of the projects on the website so that people can review them beforehand? What's the level of detail that people require to make a good choice? Typically, we go for I like the presentations myself. I find them very immediate. People have access to the supporting documents that people might have submitted, but then they hear the passion, they hear the commitment of people who are wanting to access these resources. It will probably take up to half a day to hear all the presentations, maybe a bit less, with opportunities to meet and share and network within that. So seeing it very much as a celebration, bringing people together in that spirit of the money being important, but actually what's more important is the relationships that are built. Then the grants will be awarded. That's administered by LDCBS primarily. We do have to be accountable to the money, for the money. It was a great pain to even get as far as being allowed the permission to do this radical thing of actually giving the choice to local people rather than doing it in the same old way of grants. So the money will go out, agreements will be signed, and there will be some monitoring processes agreed, but hopefully as light touch as possible. And then, as I said before, the celebration at the end of this process with the launch of a new round and an ongoing community grants pot, of course, happening at the same time, so people have access to other ways to build support for their projects and find funding. And I just wanted to finish off really with a couple of things. One is to say that this is not something that you're doing uniquely. So this was done a few years ago, a Leeds Orchard PB. So these were small grants, smaller than the ones available here in Lancaster, and they were grants to promote the development of community orchards across Leeds. And each group, as I said, was given 3 minutes presenting from the front and then 2 minutes for questions. But also during the afternoon they held practical workshops. So the PB decision making was part of a bigger Orchards Day in Leeds, where so after the presentations and the voting, then they had a gap where the numbers had to be counted, and they ran lots of workshops. And the feedback from the people who were running that is that it was very positive and they wanted to repeat it, and they echoed the availability of resources, including our own. So that's one. But I have to say, yesterday there was in Leeds, also funded by the National Lottery, a climate-themed PB event that happened only just now. So we're going to be finding out how that went. That's run through the Leeds Community Foundation and a climate partnership in Leeds. So what we're hoping is that we will connect what's happening in Lancaster with what's happening in other parts of the country, so that we can learn from each other throughout this process. And as I said before, there's lots of free resources on how to do PB, so please do explore those. They're on our own website, but you just start Googling how to do PB and PB advice, and you will start to find all participatory budgeting. You'll find the videos and lots of other resources. So that's my whole presentation as such. Please do get in touch with us, get in touch with me, get in touch with Rachel and Joe and other people in the Closing Loops programme.